Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Um, we have spent the last 8 years exploring what drives people to leave a gift in their will. And today we're going to be revealing which charities top a Premier League that celebrates how effective they've been in persuading their supporters to consider leaving a gift in their will to them. Myself and Dr. Don Burke will be talking for the next 30 minutes. My colleague, he is the brains. I used to be the beauty, but there you go. So he brings academic rigor to our approach. He's got a PhD in research and psychology, as well as nearly a decade of experience in analyzing legacy fundraising. I've been in marketing research for over 3 long decades now, and my research company FastMap focuses almost exclusively on legacy fundraising. Our specialism is acting as a comparative reference point for marketeers. We build benchmarks so that charities know how they are doing against other charities, which is vital in a competitive sector like legacy fundraising. We have 3 areas we're going to cover today. So a brief overview of our model, and we'll explain how we've organized and analyzed the 20,000 hours of data we've collected to make it useful and accessible for charities like yourselves via an internet portal. We'll then reveal the results of the Premier League. And in the last 3 minutes, we're going to be reviewing the performance of two titans of the legacy sector, CRUK and Macmillan. But we're only very brief review of that. I want to thank you all for giving 30 minutes of your time to watch this webinar. This is the highest attended webinar we've ever run, actually. Now, whether that says something about the content of the webinar or the industry generally, I don't know, but there's 78 charities attending and approximately 200 people. And some of the charities have brought along many. So CRUK, bless them, have got 10. I also have my mum attending and my brother. So hello, mum and brother. Yeah. Let me start with this. So everything I say and Tom says in the next 30 minutes is based on a mountain of data. We benchmarked 100 charities over 8 years, tracking thousands of variables and gathering 62,000 supporter responses from 20,000 hours of fieldwork. We've used robust analysis, and what I present is statistically valid, evidence-led, and most importantly, it always passes the common sense test. The way we collect the data is unusual. We first ask people which charity they support from a list of 100, and then exactly how they support that particular charity. So how much do they donate? Do they visit their shop? And what type of marketing they receive? And this allows us to segment response within a charity so it can match your supporter profiles, so give you granular profile level insight. Then we go on to ask, and who from all the charities you support would you consider leaving a gift in your will to? And then we have 20 minutes of why. And this question structures allows us to not only understand legacy fundraising, but compare the performance of every one of those 100 charities and drill down into segments to help with marketing more effectively. So what is the Legacy Premier League and why has it gained such prominence and profile? It's appeared over the years in the Financial Times. It invariably appears in the trade magazines, Third Sector and UK Fundraising. Well, it's the definition is percentage of charity supporters who are considering, intending, or have pledged a gift in their will. It's a measure of how effectively charities inspire its supporters to leave a gift in their will. And most importantly, it provides a window into a charity's future legacy income. Over the years, there's been a lot of movement in terms of who has won and who hasn't, but there has been some really consistent performers, and these are they. So Cat Protection, their average position over the 7 years is 1.4, so right at the top there. And we have a range of animal charities and also some medical and cancer charities as well there. This slide shows the intense competition of legacy fundraising. So out of 1,000 supporters, nearly half support CRUK, with 150 to 200 supporting RSPCA, NSPCC, or Cat Protection. But the drop from support to consideration and then from consideration to pledge is really steep. Many people will support 8 charities, consider 3, and perhaps pledge to just 1. But most importantly, support doesn't guarantee consideration and even fewer pledge. I'm going to hand you over to Tom in a second to explain the model that we built. But these are the 4 metrics that underpin it. Consideration, which is the tracking of legacy potential. Engagement, which measures the intensity of the relationship that a supporter has with its charity. Strategic drivers, which are the levers that can drive engagement. And finally, legacy mind, which is the psychology behind legacy giving. I'm now going to hand you over to Tom.
Thanks, David. So I'm just going to give you a brief overview of the background of engagement metrics that we analyze. So first of all, why engagement? In our research, we've been focusing on uncovering factors that explain why people leave a legacy to a charity, particularly those that relate to the relationship that a supporter has with the charity itself. The goal here is to understand the aspects of legacy giving that charities can actually influence and improve upon, rather than things like demographics or personal circumstances. We analyze engagement as a construct because these variables act as precursors to legacy giving. Essentially, before someone considers leaving a legacy gift, they need to be engaged with the charity in some way. To explore this, we use regression analysis. In simple terms, it's a statistical method which helps us understand which factors have the strongest influence on the likelihood of leaving a legacy. And from this analysis, we find that engagement to be one of, if not the strongest predictor of the likelihood to leave a legacy gift to a particular charity. And logically, that makes sense. Before someone decides to leave something as meaningful as a gift in their will, they need to feel a genuine, lasting connection to the organization. So what do we mean by engagement? Engagement describes the higher order relationship that a supporter has with a charity. So how connected, involved, or emotionally invested they feel in them. It's quite a broad concept, and we cover a lot of aspects like how satisfied they are with the experience, how emotionally connected they feel, how loyal they are, and how committed they are to supporting a particular charity. And the reason why we track multiple dimensions of engagement is that different charities might find that some aspects of engagement are more important than others. For example, some track measures of engagement like satisfaction, but satisfaction might not be the issue with their supporters, but rather the lack of a true emotional connection. We also believe that comparison with other charities is important. Some charities track engagement metrics in isolation, but this could be misleading. For example, a charity might score highly on engagement overall, but when compared to others in the sector, it could actually be performing below average. By comparing with others, we can see which areas are genuine strengths and which need to improve relative to their competitors. So I'll hand you back to David now, and he'll take us through a few examples of what that looks like.
Thanks, Tom. So now I'm going to focus on the FastMap data model. That's my dog barking. Apologies for that. If we focus on the FastMap data model, and we're going to, this slide looks at the correlation between engagement and consideration. So you see the horizontal axis is engagement and the vertical axis is consideration. And you can see there's a very strong correlation between the two. The top right-hand corner, you have charities like Cat Protection, Dogs Trust, RSPCA, who both have very strong engagement and also strong consideration. What's interesting is that within a charity, there are very different levels of engagement based on the relationship that that charity has with the supporter. So, for example, this is real data for the RSPCA. So we can see right at the top there the frequent donors. Perhaps as you'd expect, they have an index level of 1.4 times average, so 139. And at the bottom, we have lapsed donors at 92. So the challenge often with this is to identify segments that have high potential and develop them and move them along so they will ultimately leave a gift in their will to you. This chart shows how strongly different sectors engage their supporters. You can see that animal charities have the highest average engagement and are consistently above the overall mean, shown by the red line. Although children and disability charities sit lower on average, what really stands out for me is the variation within the sector, those vertical bars. So, for example, some in children and disability charities are outperforming animal charities. So engagement isn't exclusively determined by sector. It's driven by a combination of sector and also the charity. So these are the 6 engagement metrics that we measure: satisfaction, passion, commitment, emotion, loyalty, and personal connection. And as Tom said, a very wide range to catch everything, every conceivable type of engagement that you would logically want to measure. This next slide is an actual extract from the RSPCA Insight portal, and you can see the levels of satisfaction there, which are high. So on the top right, you have the composite engagement, which is an amalgamation of all those engagement scores, which is well above average. And you can see bottom right that satisfaction has been increasing gradually, and each of the singular scores are all well above 100. Particularly strong is emotion. And this collective of engagement metrics explain why RSPCA do so well with legacy fundraising.
So yeah, so the next stage of the model is the strategic drivers, which are the things that essentially drive engagement. So I'll just run you through what these are essentially. So what did we want from the drivers? We already know that engagement drives legacy giving. So logically, if a charity improves engagement with its supporters, it should lead to greater legacy consideration. However, the concept of engagement is somewhat nebulous. It's broad and emotional. Things like commitment or emotional connection are abstract concepts, which can be difficult to improve directly. So what we wanted to do was identify the underlying drivers of engagement, the more concrete or actionable areas that a charity can actually influence through their work, communication, or supporter experience. Since we've been conducting research into legacy giving for around 8 years, we've had a strong foundation to build from. We've collected a lot of data across many charities, which gave us the evidence we needed to start uncovering the specific variables that predict engagement. To find the drivers, we carried out a series of statistical analysis, including factor analysis, cluster analysis, regression analysis, and some others as well, to understand which variables are most predictive of engagement. In total, we looked at around 100 variables covering a very wide range of possible drivers, but it was also important to make sure that the drivers we identified were ones that a charity can actually affect. For example, whether someone has children or not is a driver of legacy giving, but it's not something a charity can actually influence. So we deliberately focus on the drivers that are practical and actionable. things that a charity can meaningfully change through their strategy or supportive communications. After identifying the most relevant predictors, we then validated these drivers in a separate piece of research conducted earlier this year. From that process, we arrived at 7 key strategic drivers of engagement, which you can see on the dotted box on the diagram on the slide. This flowchart is a simplified version of the model, and there are a few caveats and little complications here and there, but the general principle is clear. Engagement drives legacy consideration, and the strategic drivers drive engagement. So if a charity wants to improve legacy consideration, they first need to drive engagement, and to drive engagement, they need to improve the performance on the key strategic drivers that underpin it. And now I'll hand you back to David, who'll give you a few examples of this as well.
Thanks, Tom. So these are the 7 strategic drivers, quite a range again. Some are very charity-centric. One is supporter-centric, empowered. This is where it gets really interesting. So this is a 2-dimensional performance map for an environment charity, and it plots the performance of the strategic drivers. So along the horizontal axis is the performance. So the further to the right, the better that charity is doing on each of these strategic drivers. So it's doing particularly well on informed comms. It's doing particularly weak on meaningful tribute. The vertical axis is the correlation with engagement. So how correlated are each of these drivers for this particular charity and this particular supporter group with engagement? So what you see there immediately is empowered. This is one of the lowest performing strategic drivers for this environmental charity. But actually, because it's high, it is strongly correlated with engagement. So that might be something the environmental charity might focus on to get an immediate move towards higher levels of engagement and then ultimately consideration. So we've seen that engagement and emotion are the key levers behind legacy giving. But why? Because legacy giving is deeply personal. It's not about money. It's about meaning and identity. And this slide, which I've created, I've tried to illustrate this idea. So on the left, you've got functional choices like a pencil sharpener or a USB cable. You move to center and you've got donations and purchases that start to express a little of who we are. And on the right, you've got legacy gifts and art. These are expressions of self, shaped by values and belief. And that's why legacy fundraising can't just copy donor marketing. It must connect with identity.
Yeah, and so the goal of Legacy Mind is to uncover the psychological aspects of legacy giving, the underlying mindsets, motivations, and values that influence why people choose to leave gifts and wills, and understand how these might vary across different charities. I'm a psychologist by training. It's what I actually have my doctorate in. And I truly believe that uncovering the psychological aspects of particular behaviors is crucial to understand how to best encourage that behavior. And that is what we're trying to do, not only within Legacy Mind, but in our research generally. At its core, Legacy Mind is a series of psychological traits that relate to specifically to legacy giving. We develop these traits to help charities better understand who their supporters are and what their priorities look like. Like with the strategic drivers, it was important that these traits were relevant to legacy giving itself. There are plenty of existing psychometric scales that measure things like extroversion or openness, but their direct relevance to legacy giving isn't always clear. For example, knowing that a group of supporters is more extroverted than others doesn't immediately tell a charity what to do with that information. We wanted to go beyond general personality and identity traits to something that charities can actually apply to shape how they talk about their legacies. To create the Legacy Mind traits, we analyzed a wide range of psychographic dimensions and use exploratory factor analysis to see which ones cluster together meaningfully. From this analysis emerged a number of constructs, which were then confirmed in a confirmatory factor analysis in a separate piece of research. And again, throughout this process, we ensured that the traits we identified were relevant to both charitable or legacy giving contexts. The key constructs that emerged were family orientation, traditionalism, impact focus, prestige, symbolic immortality, and charitable identity. And David will go into a bit more of these in a second. But just to end, I just wanted to note that by understanding the psychological makeup of your supporters, you can speak to them in more empathetic and resonant language that connects to their values and motivations rather than something that is widespread and generic. So I'll hand you back to David for the rest of the webinar now.
Thank you, Tom. So these are the 6 psychographic profiles that we have that Tom has just run through. And this is a real data. It's across 3 charities, Greenpeace, CAFOD, and Royal British Legion. Now, we don't always see a significant difference in psychographic traits at an overall supporter level. We do occasionally. We see it more likely when we start to drill down into particular segments. So maybe the wealthy, maybe males or females, maybe people who have a particular relationship with the charity, they can be significantly overrepresented in a number of the traits. But here we see 3 quite different charities. So Greenpeace is very non-traditional. The supporters are very strong with symbolic immortality and charitable identity. CAFOD is the supporters are overrepresented in symbolic immortality and charitable identity. And Royal British Legion, as you'd expect, they're a very traditional organisation. And that has implications how you would talk to these supporters. So I've just illustrated how you might action this. So let's say you were going to move one of these strategic drivers of empowerment. So you wanted the supporters to feel a bit more empowered. So the language you would use if you were talking to the environmental charity would be, inspiring, forward-looking, values-driven. If you're talking to the military supporters, it would be respectful, rooted in duty and continuity. So very different expressions of essentially the same idea, but the idea being that you'll get more traction because, as Tom says, you're being more empathetic. Okay, so now I'm just going to whiz through this year's Premier League, which, as I say, we've been running for 8 years now. This is the table for the last 7 years. We could see there's been quite a range of charities, although some of them have been consistently high performing. Spent a colourful or a very active afternoon over the weekend colour coding all these, so you can see where the different causal sectors appear. So we have a few military there, quite a few overseas development, and increasingly environmental charities, a few children charities. Health and disability always do well. And increasingly, we've got 2 Alzheimer's charities which seem to be rising up the table. Cancer charities are always there, and animal charities invariably at the top or close to the top. So the table it has a number of columns. We've got the rank on the left. We've got the movement year on year, the charity, an index, which is comparative against all charities. And then we've got the sector index, which just looks at that particular charity compared with its causal sector. So this is positions 30 to 21. And there are some new entrants here. We've got Parkinson's UK in Crisis, who have entered for the first time, or Parkinson's have. Crisis were there a couple of years ago. We see WaterAid dropped a few positions. Position 20 to 11. You can see there's been some significant movement there. RSPCA have jumped 10 places. And Children's Society also enters the league for the first time. positions 10 to 6, we can see that PDSA have jumped 4 places. And interestingly, for the first time in the 8 years we've been tracking this, Macmillan have overtaken CR UK marginally on consideration. So we're going to do a bit of a deep dive on that in a minute or so, why that might have happened and where each is overperforming. And then the winners. So we've got Cats Protection yet again topping the lead. Battersea have done well. They've jumped a couple of places, and RSPCA have also gone up. So well done to Cats Protection yet again, top of the league. So I'm going to be sending out emails to the various trade press, liaising with them, and that should be appearing all over the place, hopefully. And Cats Protection have kindly allowed us. We work with Cats Protection, and one of our clients. This is their internet portal, and what it shows is the engagement metrics across some of their segments, and bearing in mind the average is 100, so you can see there that they're performing particularly well across everything. I mean, high value donor, 1.5 times average, a very high score. Okay, so just a bit of a deep dive into the relative performance between these two huge and successful charities. So over the last 7 years, CRUK has been on average about 4 places above Macmillan, but the first time that's been flipped round. This is this strategic driver performance map for both CRUK and Macmillan, and it's at all supporter level. So on the right, you can see the color-coded performance of each strategic driver. So you see that Macmillan is actually outperforming CRUK on every driver except for Meaningful Tribute. But what's particularly interesting, if you look at the Meaningful Driver on the performance map, it is the most strongly correlated for both charity with engagement. So it's the highest vertically. But what's interesting is that CRUK are actually outperforming Macmillan on this, even though actually this is stronger for Macmillan. So that's just one area that Macmillan might want to focus on. It's one slight area of weakness. This is looking at all the segments that we can drill down to for these two particular charities. So we've got on and off the database, we've got demographics, we've got different types of donor, how they shop, volunteers, fundraisers, community, etc., etc., a whole range of different segments. So this is how CRUK are overperforming. So you can see there, they're doing particularly well where they are involving supporters. So volunteers, fundraisers, and community participation is a lot higher than with Macmillan. They do slightly better with the 70 plus and the female, but with Macmillan, they have real strength in breadth. So they have they're on many of these segments, they are ahead. They're particularly ahead with frequent donors, online shoppers, those who receive a newsletter, and those who receive magazine. And what I found interesting about those, the ones that are overrepresented, they're quite easy segments to target. So you can immediately target frequent donors. You know who they are. They're on your database. Same with online shoppers. They're visiting your website. And those, by definition, those people receive your newsletter and receive magazines. You also know exactly who they are. So a little bit of a deep dive into the frequent donors. And you can see the relative performance here. You can see that Macmillan is overperforming on all cases for frequent donors, with the exception of passion, and particularly on transparent comms and support is crucial. Looking at the trust donation usage on that driver map, we see with CRUK, that is the lowest score, but getting things in perspective, This is all well above 100. So there's still, both charities are doing still exceptionally well. But if we're looking for small marginal gains, this is possibly an area of improvement. You can see trust donation usage is the most highly correlated with engagement, but actually it's the lowest performing strategic driver for CRUK. Okay, so this is this. I just wanted to let you know what is in the portal that we offer. So we've got for every portal, and we've got many of them. We've got 7 benchmark comparisons against every charity, against the causal sector, 3 direct competitors, a strategic competitor group, and the 4 fiercest competitors. There are 32 profile segments, which I just showed before. Up to 50 users can access the portal at one time within the charity. Each portal has up to 1,200 charts and diagrams to review. So a huge amount of data that's accessible and analyzable across all those key metrics. And we've got portals on each of these charities here. So it's in alphabetical order, so I'm sure you'll be able to pick your charity name out there. A lot of portals that are all built and available. And final slide, just to say that well, there's some very nice quotes there, testimonials. So at the top there from Professor Russell James, and also then on the bottom right we've got nice quotes, testimonials from three of our clients. We're offering 10 free 20-minute insight surgeries where I'm happy to have a look at your portal with you and just look at some of the key findings that we've found in it. And we're starting to book those in now. We can only do 10, but if you'd like me to run through that with you, please email me. Those are my contact details at the bottom, and we're starting to book those in now for the 26th. We commence on the 26th of October. And that's it. So thank you very much for your time. And we will be sending out we'll be loading the Premier League report on the website, so it'll be downloadable. Thank you very much and have a good day.